Mathematicians, today you are going to use everything that you have learned about rounding and addition and subtraction to help you understand patterns and rules. So if you look up here, there are a few numbers and then two blanks. What we're going to have to do is figure out what the pattern is and what rule the pattern is following. So I'm saying two vocabulary words that you need to know. We have pattern and rule. So you could think about a pattern in lots of different ways. A pattern could be as simple as circle, square, circle, square, circle, square, and so on. Or it could be something like colors switching off, right? You could do red, blue, red, blue, and so on. So a pattern is just a group of objects that follow a rule while repeating. So there's that definition. We have a group of objects that follow a rule while repeating. The two keywords that I want you to notice is that the group has to follow a rule and it has to be repeating. So for example, if I look at my first example, circle, square, circle, square, circle, it would be square next. It's repeating. Red, blue, red, blue. Next would be red, blue. The rule is that they're switching off shape to shape or color to color and repeating over and over again. So what's a rule? Well, a rule is when we're talking about numbers, the operation that the pattern is following. When you see the word operation, what I want you to think about in your head are all the different mathematical operations you can do, like adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So, for example, maybe your rule is that every time you add 2. Or maybe your rule is that every time you multiply by 3. Those are some examples of rules that the pattern might follow. On the next slide, we are going to look at this pattern up here. We're going to first try to figure out what rule these numbers are following in their pattern, and then we're going to try to figure out the two blanks at the end. Here are the numbers again: 39,580, 49,580, 59,580, blank, blank. So I need to figure out what is happening to these numbers. What rule are these numbers following? I'm going to go ahead and move this down a little bit so we can work with it. When we're looking at big numbers like this, it can sometimes be overwhelming, but all we need to do is try to figure out which number is changing. So actually, you know what? Let's kind of put a little thought bubble up here. So your first step, you're going to look at the numbers and ask yourself, which digits are changing? When I look at these numbers, I notice actually that in every single one of them, I see 9,580, 9,580, 9,580. The only digit that is actually changing in these numbers is the first number. So my first question is, they're changing by what operation? Is it addition, subtraction? Is it multiplication, division? What's happening? I can see that each time the numbers are getting higher. So my guess is they're probably adding, but what? Adding what? If I started at 39,000 580 plus something would get me 49,580. What number would I need to put here to make this addition problem work? None of these numbers are changing, right? So those would all just be zeros. But this number at the beginning goes from a 3 to a 4. So in fact, the pattern is that each time 10,000 is being added. So I need to figure out what will be the next two numbers in this pattern. I need to go from 59,580 and add 10,000 because plus 10,000 is my rule. And then I will have to do it again, add 10,000 because that's my rule. So if I start at 59,580 and add 10,000, 59 plus another 10,000 would be 69,580. And then if I did it one more time, I would get 79,580. So I was able to figure out that my rule is to add 10,000 each time. And what I did to figure that out is I looked at my big numbers and I asked myself which digits are changing. Sometimes your rule might be to subtract instead of add. Sometimes it might be to multiply, and sometimes it might be to divide. Let's do one more example that's a little bit trickier. In the last pattern, I was able to ask myself which digits are changing, and the pattern right away came to mind. This one's a little trickier. But again, let's ask ourselves which digits are changing from number to number. I can first recognize that the numbers always start with a 6, so that's staying the same. The first two numbers have a 3 in the 10,000s place, but the second two have a 4. And then I'm noticing something really interesting here. If I look at the ending, I see a 120 here and a 120 here. But then in the other numbers, I'm seeing a 720 and a 720. My goodness, what is happening? So the one thing I'm seeing right away, though, is that the numbers are increasing. They're getting bigger. So to get from this number to the next, something is being added. But what, I'm not so sure yet. But I know the numbers are getting bigger. I can see that from the first number to the second number, the only thing that changes is that it goes from 120 to 720. So, let's again do our little addition sentence. So if I had 63,120 plus what would get me 63,720. Well, I can zero out the place values that don't change. Doesn't change, doesn't change, doesn't change, doesn't change. 1 plus what would get me to 7? 1 plus 6. So in fact, 63,120 plus 600 gets me to 63,720. So now that I've figured out what happens between the first two terms in my pattern, I need to see if the next two follow that same pattern. So I need to get from 63,720 to 64,120. 120. So let's do the same thing. I have 63,720 plus what would get me to 64,120. Now, if this is 600, then I know that the pattern is to add 600 every time. But this pattern might be a little bit more complicated, so let's see. Okay, so I'm seeing some things I can zero out. All right, so 0, 0. This is interesting. I need to get from 7 to 1. So that's 7 to 1, carry the 1, 7 to 11. 7 plus what equals 11? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 7 plus 4 would equal 11. Carry the 1. So actually, the pattern for the second number is 400. So this is interesting. Maybe the pattern for this, the rule for this, I mean, is add 600 and then add 400. Let's check if this one is add 600 again. And then we'll be sure what the pattern is and what the rule is. So 64,120 plus what would get us to 64,720? Is it going to be 600 again? This would get zeroed out, this would get zeroed out, 600. So this pattern is add 600, then add 400. Add 600, then add 400. I need some more room to do a little bit more work, so let's move these over. Okay, so let's see what the next term in this pattern would be. I'll erase this real quick. Okay, so I am saying that the rule for this pattern is to add 600, then to add 400. Okay, so knowing that that's the rule, let's go ahead and see what the next two terms are in the pattern. So since I did so far, I did add 600 and then 400, 600. The next term right here, I would need to add 400. So for this one, I would need to do 64,720 plus the 400 and see what I get. It would be 65,120, which makes sense because I noticed that the 120 switched off. 120, 120, 120. Then finally, to get my final term, I added 600 for this one, 400 for this one, I'll have to add 600 to get my last one. So I'll take the answer I got and add 600 to that and see what I get here. 65,720. Okay, so this was another pattern that had an addition rule, but it was a little bit more complicated. Instead of just adding the same one number every time, you switched off between 600 and 400.